Hi and welcome back. I'm Scott Schneider and this is Stereo Niche. Today I'm going to do a review of the new large Advent speaker from Henry Claus. Let's get to it. Okay, so before we actually get to doing the sound test and evaluating them, I wanted to talk about the Advent a little bit. So this is one of Henry Claus's most famous designs. It started in 1968 and ran through around 82 or 83. This one is called the bullnose version. It started around 1978 and ran through the 83 life cycle. So we call it the bullnose because of this curved front walnut piece. But they have the same design and the same style as the previous large Advents. They're still a 2-driver setup with what we call a fried egg tweeter and a 10-inch woofer. Now the prior model, the only real difference was that the woofer had a masonite ring that had the same size basket but a smaller cone. But you still had the same bass and you still have the same tweeter output, and it still has the same sound. So I'm going to use this as my baseline going forward. Millions and millions of these were sold in the 1970s and through the early 80s. And for good reason. They're a great sounding speaker and they came in at a fairly low price point. So you should be able to find these really with relative ease. There's still a ton of them out there and they might need a little bit of reconditioning, but it's not something that's very hard to do. And just about anyone can do this really. This particular set I found in the original boxes and they had really very minimal use and they're really in pristine condition. So going forward, every other speaker that I review will be compared to the Advent, and I'll let you know if I think they sound better or worse, and I'll rate them on basically 5 criteria. One being, how do they look? Do they still, does the design still look relevant today, or do they look dated? What is the imaging quality of the speaker itself? Can you hear that separation of the individual instruments? And then the different levels of the sound itself, from the high, mid tones, and then the bass. And I'll let you know what I think about each of those independently, and then how they rate against the Advent. Let's see how it goes. All right, the reviews are in. Thank you for your patience. So I took a good bit of time and did some critical listening. Now you may think that I've had these speakers forever and why do I need to have a listening session? Well, because I've never had to evaluate them in some numerical review before. It's one thing to just hook them up and enjoy them and say, yeah, I like that, or I don't like that. But this time I actually stopped and had to sort of think about each aspect I was reviewing and write my thoughts down about each different area. So it's not something, you might think that your listening memory is pretty good, but I don't really think so. I think you have to do it in real time. If you're going to really understand the differences or the nuances of speakers, you have to do it in the real time, in the session that you're listening to, and take the notes, because it's not something you can really do from memory. So here are my notes, and these are my thoughts around what I heard. And of course, the first part is not so much, it's not hearing, it's a style. I'm a very visual person. I have my collection partially because I love the way they look. There's a lot of the engineering, the design decisions that were made. To me, those are very important, and I enjoyed looking at them just equally as much as I enjoy listening to them. So for me, it's a big part of the collecting. So for style of the Advent, I gave them a 13. And the Advent went through a couple of iterations. If you're familiar with the history of them, the early series, they had a walnut version, which would be the equivalent to this one. And it had a beveled edge on it. It was a nice looking speaker, but I prefer the bullnose over that model, certainly over the utility cab. Now, The utility cab and the walnut, sound-wise, will sound the same, but from a visual perspective, my favorite is the bullnose. They were also considered a bookshelf speaker of the day, which would be a pretty large speaker, obviously, for us currently. So the footprint of them is a little bit large for what's called a bookshelf, but overall, I still like them. I think they're a very good-looking speaker. So I gave them a 13. Now, on to imaging. You know, a speaker that can image well is it's kind of amazing in a way. When you hear the separation of speakers and they're filling out the room, it's a bit magical in a way. And that's a very important aspect of any stereo speakers that you will listen to. And the Advents do it quite well. It's kind of surprising, I think, a bit for a two-way speaker to image as well as they do. And they also have a pretty good sweet spot as well. If you listen to as many speakers as I've listened to, and you've experienced, some speakers have a sweet spot about that big, and you really have to sit. There's only one place you can sit and enjoy those speakers as they should be heard, and it's fine if you're the one that's sitting in that chair. But if you have other people there, it's it's not quite as exciting. Well, these have a pretty wide imaging sweet spot, and you don't have to be the only one in the room to enjoy them. So that's a nice feature. So for imaging, I gave them a 15. Now for the lows, the mids, and the highs, on the low end, they do pretty well. They're not the most bass-heavy speaker I've heard, but they have a sealed enclosure, and it's a really nice bass. I'm not a bass-heavy centric kind of person. I like bass, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming for me. And for me, they do pretty well. But I gave them a 14. They do well, but I've heard other speakers that can, do more with the same amount of enclosure. Now on the mids, I love singers and singer-songwriters, and the voice is important for me. So I have to have a good mid-range, or else it's just not pleasing at all. Well, the Advents do exceptionally well. Again, thinking a two-way can't really do mid-range very well is also surprising. You would think that they couldn't, but the crossover really blends the tweeter and the woofer together in a way that you don't miss a dedicated mid-range whatsoever. And in fact, if you didn't know it was a two-way, you would probably assume that there is one there. All of the voicing was very upfront, separated. It was all quite pleasing and very nice. I mean, there's nothing to complain about. So I gave them a 16 out of 20. On the highs, one thing for me that's extremely important is the tweeter itself. I have extremely sensitive ears, and even back into I'm in my late 50s now, and back in my 20s, I became aware that my ears were sensitive to certain types of tweeters. I would get something called ear fatigue. And I don't think it's a common issue. I don't think most people have it. But if you have it and you listen to a tweeter that is, for some reason, not attuned to your ear, it is fatiguing. Your ears actually ache. And it can happen within 5 to 10 minutes, and you start experiencing an ache of your ears. So having a tweeter like that won't last very long in my setup. The fried egg tweeter is, to me, amazing. Being as old as it is and kind of unusual looking as it is, it's a very nice high-end that's smooth but crisp at the same time. And I never get irritated with them whatsoever. They're just, to me, as far as the tone, a perfect tweeter. I probably have lost some of my high-end hearing by now, but it still sounds great to me. And so for that, I gave them a 16 as well. So for keeping up with the scores, that comes to a total of 74 points out of a possible 100. those were the results. I hope you found them informative and somewhat entertaining. And through the power of video, the speaker appears to never have moved. So going forward, that'll be my format. Again, this is the baseline now, and every speaker I look at and listen to thereafter will be compared to it. So let me know how you feel this format is working or will work. Let me know any thoughts, any feedback, anything you think I can include, and I'll try to incorporate that into the reviews going forward. So thank you for watching.